Public Service Commission, we are continuing on docket number 2024-34-E concerning Dominion Energy of South Carolina. During the lunch break and thereafter, the attorneys have had a chance to confer, and there's some testimony that we feel like now can be submitted or may be submitted without putting the witness up to be present. If the parties choose to enter testimony by verification and affidavit, that it will be accepted, and the verification and affidavit must be filed for each testimony. Similarly, exhibits must be included in the file verification. But the commission has decided what witnesses they want to hear from, and we're going to proceed with that.
Thank you, Chair Powers. I just wanted to clarify before I called the next witness that the commission was finished questioning the prior panel of Jennifer Nelson and Brandon Phibbs. I believe you were. I just wanted to confirm.
We did, and I did not tell them that they could step down, but obviously they did a good job of doing it without me.
Thank you. Well, we will now call Craig All.
Mr. All, come forward.
Sir, raise your right.
Let's see.
You're on.
Sir, raise your right hand, please. Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. All, could you please state your full name for the record?
Craig Brian All.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm the Director of Retail Operations Support for Dominion Energy, South Carolina.
Thank you. And did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your direction 24 pages of direct testimony that we pre-filed in this docket?
Yes, I did.
And if I asked you all the questions contained in that pre-filed direct testimony today, would your answers remain the same?
They would, yes.
Chair Powers, I move the pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. All be entered in the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony, Mr. All, consisting of 24 pages, will be submitted into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. All, did your pre-filed direct testimony include one exhibit labeled CBA-1?
Yes, it did.
Chair Powers, I move that the exhibit labeled CBA-1 be entered into the record as the hearing exhibit, which I believe is 15.
CBA 1 will be put in the record as hearing exhibit number 15.
Thank you. And Mr. All, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared under your direction 4 pages of rebuttal testimony pre-filed in the docket?
Yes, I did.
And again, if I asked you all the questions contained in your pre-filed rebuttal testimony today, would your answers remain the same?
They would, yes.
Chair Powers, I move the 4 pages of pre-filed rebuttal testimony of Mr. All be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The 4 pages of rebuttal testimony submitted by Mr. All will be put in the record and as if orally given from the stand.
Thank you. And Mr. All is now available for questioning from the commission, with the parties having waived cross-examination.
Commissioner C. Williams.
Thank you, Chair Powers. Good to see you, Mr. All.
Good to see you.
I have 2 questions. One you may be tipped off on because I think you were referred to yesterday as the person who could talk about how the company will message the one-time impact of the $7.5 million.
Yes, it will be a line item on the bill that says electric credit by PSC order and the number, and it'll display a one-time credit on the bill and reduce the electric part of the bill. We'll also have some special messaging describing some more details about the credit.
Where will you put the special messaging?
There's a special message section on the bill.
So you'd have to open the bill to see the line item as well as the special messaging.
That is correct.
Okay. My other question has to do with page 12 of your testimony, your original testimony, the chart number 1, and I've just found that section on my app. I'm one of those 500,000 people who've downloaded it or whatever that number was. How do you expect to use that going forward? Because it's a lot of great information.
Well, it's to put a face for the energy usage to our customers. So a lot of times people get their bill, they don't understand all the components. You got your heating, cooling, and appliances. So this section, tries to give reference to how they're, using their bill and give them a better understanding of how they can better manage their energy usage. One of the things, I think Mr. Sam mentioned his testimony, you have so many customers now that have appliances, things that stay on 24 hours a day. This app shows you some of those things as well.
Are there opportunities where, I didn't mean to cut you off. Please continue.
This app also shows you your hourly usage and by day, so you can kind of gauge, how you use electricity and or gas, and look at it by each hour. It does bill projections after about 5 days into your billing period. It projects what your bill is going to be, and also provides for alerts. You can add alerts if your usage or cost exceeds a certain amount.
Do you think there are opportunities that we will see going forward from an energy efficiency perspective, or for time of use rate folks that are going to benefit from this?
Well, definitely. We've talked about the new time of use rates in the period, so you can combine your understanding of your energy usage by hour and see how you would fit into a time of use rates. Would it be better or worse for you? Or even better, you can say, how can I move some of my energy usage to a off-peak period, and could benefit from it. Some customers that can do that could really benefit from a time of use plan, and this data will give them a better understanding of that.
Did you just say that there will be a tool for people that are considering time of use?
There will be
to evaluate?
This tool, will definitely help you. But in the future, we will develop more tools that can play more what-if scenarios and things like that.
But can a time of use, someone who's evaluating a time of use rate, is there a tool that's associated with this now that will allow them to compare?
Yeah, well, you can see your energy usage there and calculate it yourself. I think in the future we will provide more robust tools where they can actually, if I move 20
Right.
kWh from on-peak to off-peak, here's the effect on my bill.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Commissioner Caston.
Thank you. Just 2 or 3 short questions. Excuse me. Do you know what the estimated life of a smart meter and its components are?
According to the manufacturers, approximately 20 years.
Now, with these particular meters, you're not dealing with a battery or anything like that, are you? Or does it?
Not on the electric meters. We do have smart meters on the gas side that does have
Okay.
Battery technology.
It sounds like I was going to ask, what is the company doing with the data? What kind of data do you collect?
These meters provide 15-minute data on usage, voltage, many different, other different items. And so, we just mentioned them. We're going to let, the customers can download it and see their usage. So first and foremost is for the customers. But we also have analytics that we use against, this data. This analytics can help improve some of our reliability. It looks at transformer loading, different things like that. There's a lot of use cases we're exploring where we can use this data to improve our reliability as well.
Okay, so it sounds like, and don't let me put words in your mouth, but let me ask it. To the best of your knowledge, are you fully utilizing the stuff that it can do?
Not yet. And part of our testimony is talking about future plans for it. So we are utilizing a lot of them. I'm very proud of what we've done with this data. Many other utilities have implemented this technology, but we have integrated it in with our outage management systems to improve. I think Mr. Sam or witness Randall mentioned that, how it helps pinpoint outages, and we got it with our customer system. You can go on our website. I had a customer or an acquaintance call me and said they forgot to turn power on this weekend for $1 moving in an apartment. Went to our website on a Sunday, and 15 minutes later, they had power. So this is being used in many different ways, but there are definitely future use cases that we haven't utilized it for yet.
There are more capabilities.
There are
than
more
you're using,
capabilities, yes.
But you intend to use all of them to the maximum.
Very proud of how we're trying to use this data and these capabilities.
Well, I'm not going to throw stones. I'm just now getting good at the microwave. So, is there a benefit to customers? I mean, with all you've said and the cost of AMI smart meters, is there a value and benefit to customers from Dominion doing this?
Definitely, I think our cost-benefit analysis proved that the economic benefits to our customers has been mentioned in earlier testimony about our growing system. And so, as we grow and have more meters, this system helps mitigate a lot of the future cost increases that we would have to serve our customers.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. I have no more questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner Cat. Any further commissioner questions? Thank you, Mr. Hall. You may step down.
Thank you, Chair Powers. The company will now call Mark Lindley and Kevin Kokums.
Gentlemen, come forward.
All right. Sirs, raise your right hand, please. You swear affirm the testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
I do. Thank you. Mr. Lindley, I'll start with you. If you could state your full name for the record, please.
Mark Lidling.
And what is your role with the company?
I'm controller of DESC.
Thank you. And did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your direction 14 pages of direct testimony pre-filed in the docket?
Yes, I did.
If I ask you all the questions contained in that pre-filed direct testimony today, would your answers remain the same?
Yes.
Chair Powers, I move the 14 pages of Mr. Lindley's direct testimony be entered into the record if given orally from the stand.
The testimony of witness Mark Lindley, consisting of 14 pages, will be submitted into evidence as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you. And Mr. Lindley, did your pre-filed direct testimony have an exhibit labeled MFL1?
Yes.
Chair Powers, I would move that exhibit MFL1 be entered into the record as the next hearing exhibit, and I've forgotten where we are.
It will be number 16.
16.
And will be submitted in evidence.
Thank you. Mr. Kokums, welcome back. What again is your role with the company?
I work for DESC as a manager of regulation.
Thank you. And in addition to your settlement testimony, did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your direction 26 pages of pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
If I ask you all the questions in that pre-filed direct testimony today, would your answers remain the same?
Yes, they would.
Chair Powers, I move Mr. Kokums' 26 pages of direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of witness Cochran will consisting, how many pages was it?
It was 26. 26.
Pages will be submitted in evidence as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you. And Mr. Kokums, did your pre-filed direct also include exhibits KRK1 through KRK7?
Yes, it did.
Chair Powers, I would move that KRK1 through KRK7 be entered into the record as hearing exhibit 17.
KRK 1 through 7 are admitted into the record as exhibit number 17.
Thank you. Mr. Lindley, back to you. Did you also prepare or cause to be prepared under your direction 10 pages of rebuttal testimony pre-filed in the docket?
Yes, I did.
And if I asked you the questions contained in that pre-filed rebuttal testimony today, would your answers remain the same?
Yes, they would.
Chair Powers, I move the 10 pages of Mr. Lindley's rebuttal testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The 10 pages of Mr. Lindley's rebuttal testimony will be submitted into evidence as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you. And Mr. Cocombs, did you likewise prepare or cause to be prepared under your direction 16 pages of corrected rebuttal testimony pre-filed on July 1st?
Yes.
And if I ask you all of the questions contained in your pre-filed corrected rebuttal testimony today, would your answers remain the same?
Yes, they would.
Chair Powers, if we could please admit the 16 pages of Mr. Cocomb's 16 pages corrected rebuttal testimony into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The 16 pages of corrected rebuttal testimony of Kevin Cocombs will be submitted into evidence as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you. And with the other panel, Mr. Cocombs and Mr. Lindley are available for commission questions.
Commissioner questions. Commissioner C. Williams.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
First of all, I just want to say thank you to the company for making everybody available and not putting any pressure on us to speed this up or I appreciate that we are trying to condense it, but I really appreciate your satisfying my desire to understand this better and to absorb more of it. So thank you for being part of that, and thank you to everybody in the room. Mr. Lindley, according to the analysis that the company performed, how much service life was left for the early retired peaker units, and how does that compare with the time frame that they were in use to provide service to customers?
So the remaining life for the peaker units varied by unit. At the time of retirement, there were, I would say, a few years left on each of those plants. So not an extensive amount. So it wasn't a particularly early retirement of those units. They had served customers for a number of years. But there were a few years left, and the order that we received required us and allowed us to continue to amortize the remaining balances over those remaining years that were expected as if they had stayed in service. The order also allowed us to include costs incurred in the decommissioning and cleanup of those plants into that same deferred account. So that has extended the life on the remaining amortization period for particularly the PAR facility. So as of recently, what we have left is approximately 4 years on the Bushy Park facility.
For amortization.
For amortization, correct.
Okay.
And approximately, going off memory here, I believe we have 15 years left on the PAR facility.
And about how long were each of those plants in service?
That I don't know.
I don't know. It was decades. I don't know.
I appreciate your saying decades.
Yes.
And Mr. Lindley, how did the company arrive at the requested $683,000 in O&M expenses related to the turbine accrual?
I'm sorry, I'm not
Okay.
remembering the 683,000. Is there a reference I could?
I don't have one. I guess the question for O&M expenses, the increased O&M expenses originally included in the adjustment, is that removed in the settlement agreement?
Sorry, bear with me.
Sorry for the lack of specificity.
Oh, I think I see it.
Okay.
Yeah. So and this is the turbine major maintenance accrual. The effect of the adjustment is to increase test year O&M by 683,000. Yes, so that's a measure of and just an increased expected maintenance expense that would be in the realm of that accrual versus what we had prior to this case.
And was that O&M expense included, was it removed in the settlement agreement?
No, I don't believe so. I believe that adjustment was accepted by all parties.
Okay. And Mr. Cocombs, there is, in your testimony, I believe there was testimony related to restricted stock units. And my question is whether those are covered under paragraph 34, where the parties agree to all of their expenses as recommended by ORS, except as provided by through the provisions of this agreement, and all necessary adjustments that are changed due to this settlement and attachment A. So I guess the question is, what happened to the restricted stock units?
When you say restricted stock, you're referring to the restricted stock that's part of incentive compensation?
I think so. The things that were clear to me as I read become less clear the more I hear from everybody.
So if you're referring to the all of the pieces of the settlement agreement that are tied to incentive compensation are discussed in paragraph 30 of the settlement agreement, which outlines the portions of incentive compensation that were disallowed or removed for settlement purposes.
So I do not see restricted stock units there, so they were not excluded.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. No further questions. Thank you very much.
Any further commissioner questions? Hearing none, gentlemen, thank you very much. You may step down.
Thank you.
The company would call Daniel Cassis, Cheryl Shelton, and Matthew Stanton to the stand.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Let's go left to right. Mr. Stanton, please state your name for the record.
It's Matthew Stanton,
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
employed by Dominion Energy Services as the HR director for both Dominion Energy Services and Dominion Energy South Carolina.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your direction 30 pages of rebuttal testimony that was pre-filed with the commission in this proceeding?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or additions to that testimony?
No, sir.
If I were to ask you the questions contained in that pre-filed testimony today, would your answers from the stand be the same?
They would.
Mr. Chairman, at this time I would move the pre-filed rebuttal testimony of Mr. Stanton into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-file rebuttal testimony of Mr. Stanton will be placed in the record in the evidence as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Stanton, is there an exhibit MES1 attached to your rebuttal testimony?
Yes, there is.
Mr. Chairman, are there any changes or additions to that exhibit?
No.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, I'd move exhibit MES1 into the record of this proceeding.
MES1 is accepted into the record as exhibit number 18.
I'll now address these questions to Ms. Shelton. Ms. Shelton, would you please state your name for the record?
Cheryl Shelton,
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
Dominion Energy South Carolina. I'm the manager of demand side management, energy efficiency, or energy conservation.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your direction 19 pages of rebuttal testimony that's been pre-filed in the record of this proceeding?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any exhibits to your rebuttal testimony?
No, I do not.
Are there any changes or additions to the rebuttal testimony?
No.
If I were to ask you all the questions contained in that rebuttal testimony today, would your answers from the stand be the same?
Yes, they would.
Mr. Chairman, I would move Ms. Shelton's testimony into the record.
The pre-file rebuttal testimony of Ms. Shelton will be accepted into the evidence as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Cassis, would you please state your name for the record?
Daniel F. Cassis,
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
Dominion Energy, South Carolina, New Business and Customer Solutions General Manager.
All right. Did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your direction 13 pages of rebuttal testimony that has been pre-filed with the commission in this proceeding?
I did.
Do you have any changes or corrections to that testimony?
No changes.
Are there any exhibits to that testimony?
There are no exhibits.
If I were to ask you all the questions contained in that testimony today, would your answers be the same?
It would.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move Mr. Cassis's pre-filed rebuttal testimony into the record of this proceeding.
The pre-file rebuttal testimony of Mr. Cassis, consisting of 13 pages, will be submitted in evidence as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Chairman, the panel is available for commission questions.
Thank you. Commissioner questions? Commissioner Williams?
Thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Chair Powers. I'm going to start with Ms. Shelton because you've had the greatest heads up that I was going to ask you some questions. And I think the general question is, are you familiar with the settlement agreement and the order from 2021, from the prior rate case?
Yes, I am.
What I'm interested in at a big global level is to understand what was achieved from that agreement and how what you're adding to it in this settlement agreement, how that moves us forward. I can give you more specific questions, but that's what I'm looking for.
So I'll talk very broadly. I'm going to refer to my notes if you don't mind, just to make sure that I don't miss anything. How about that, just to make sure? So that docket, there was I will refer to a letter that was filed under the docket 2022-22E. So I want to make sure that I don't miss anything, but there was a stakeholder process that occurred, and we agreed to 4 different items or 4 different activities that we would complete. So we agreed to $15 million that would go to forgive balances for customers that were in arrears. And so that process occurred, and that has been completed. Then we agreed to $15 million to go to the energy share and funds to be used through the Office of Economic Recovery. And so through the Energy Efficiency Advisory Group, we did provide an update to our Energy Efficiency Advisory Group on that. And to date, about 1.2 million of that 15 million has been used by our customers. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, but a lot of COVID money has been used. So COVID money was used first, and now we anticipate a good bit of the 15 million will start to be used very quickly. Then 3, we agreed to initiate, and I think you touched on this question yesterday, a stakeholder process to look at a PIP or a percentage of payment plan program, similar to what they have in, or they considered having in Dominion, Ohio, and actually Dominion, Virginia. And so we went through a stakeholder process. I personally was not involved in that process, but I am familiar with what happened in that. So there were over 4 meetings held. Our manager of customer assistance in the stakeholder process, they had 4 meetings, included an AA, I think even an AARP town hall was either suggested or had. But they went through that entire process, and then they determined at the end if we were to initiate a PIP, that percentage of income payment program here in South Carolina, that it really would require legislation or general act of a General Assembly here in South Carolina. Overall, it would result in cost shifting for customers. So really it was determined that, we would support, Dominion would certainly support such a program, but we could not initiate that. And then the last one, we agreed to double our annual commitment to Energy Share, which included funding to include, I think it was $500,000 in 2021, 2022, and then again in 2023, which included small general service customers. So those were 4 of those initiatives. Now, that is a little bit different than the current settlement agreement, because that's going to include $3.5 million that's going to be shareholder money that'll come directly to DSM to be used for the NEAT program, which is our low-income program. We'll bring that to the Energy Efficiency Group and determine how we're going to spend that in that current program. So we have a neighborhood energy efficiency program that we offer core measures to customers and communities. In addition to that, as we do the core measures, then we offer customers, the highest energy users in those communities, what I will call weatherization measures. And we had already agreed through the Energy Efficiency Advisory Group to start including not just mobile home weatherization, but site-built homes. So I think through the collaboration, we'll add those funds to do additional homes. I don't know what we'll agree to on the collaboration, but I'm certain that we'll come to some kind of agreement to expand that. And we agreed to do over 1,000 customers over the next 3 years. So it's just additional services that we'll be providing to our low-income customers who can certainly use it. I hope that answers your question.
I appreciate your being prepared. It does, and thank you for listening well and following up.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Stanton. I have to find my question for you.
Sure.
It has to do with the environmental portion of the annual incentive plan. You noted that employees can earn points if at least one action in support of sustainability commitments is completed. Am I in the right target area?
That's correct.
Okay. What's a benchmark, a performance indicator for successful completion of a project? Is it based on an objective criteria?
It would be also just with the leadership, would be the leadership saying that the project has been completed, but there would be some objective measures that would be used, and it would be dependent upon, I think, the business segment to track those. I don't have a line of sight to all of our sustainability objectives.
So the business segment would track it.
Correct.
And they would have metrics?
Correct.
What kind of metrics?
I think it's going to depend on the goal, and I apologize for not having that information in front of me, Commissioner.
And do any of those metrics, those actions, have customer benefits?
Well, I think anything related to our annual incentive plan is going to have benefits for all of our stakeholders. I mean, based on its design. So whether it's an environmental goal that you're talking about, a safety goal, a customer experience goal, I mean, the way the plan works is that our employees are working together to achieve all the goals of the incentive plan. And if those goals are achieved, it's going to result in more of a healthy company, both financially and non-financially. And from my perspective, that would benefit all of our stakeholders, to include our customers.
Okay. I apologize for all the questions, but I'm going to do them quickly, and I think I'm proving
No
that.
problem. Yep.
So, Mr. Cassis, that was my shift to you. Good to see you, and appreciate your testimony as it related to electric vehicles. And I just want to understand a little more about the employee participation program that is in your testimony. Do the employees receive a stipend to participate?
Commissioner, so there were two programs that I provided testimony on. One was an incentive if you purchased an EV. So that was one of the programs that I referenced in my direct testimony. And the
So
second,
that one, there would be $1.
yes, correct.
Okay.
Yep. And then there's EV charging access at multiple sites within our service territory that they would have access to.
If it's inappropriate to ask, and it may be in your testimony, how much incentive did the employee get for purchasing an EV?
Since I drive an EV and I got the incentive, I know the answer. So I can tell you it's, believe it was $3,000 incentive. And I think that it graduates. It wasn't unlimited as the initial adopters took advantage of it. I think if my recollection is it actually stepped down. It was built upon policy that was actually across the enterprise. And DESC adopted the DEV policy for incentives.
Are all of your employees who got that, are they customers of DESC?
To my knowledge, yeah. I don't have the full collection, but charging is done at home, but it's also done marketplace, retail, DC fast
Right.
charge. So it's kind of across a good assumption is a lot of charging gets done on our system, even if they didn't live in our service.
So not
territory.
100%, but
I
a
couldn't
lot.
tell you for sure, yeah.
Right. Do you know how many employees are using the workplace charging program?
Yeah, I actually parked there yesterday during the break, and the campus now at Casey, almost all those all those ports were filled. I'm typically in Charleston at least a couple of days a week, and so I usually see about half of those. So at varying hours, people charge, leave, go do business, come back. So the uptake is surprising. I think we have the right access. It's access not only for employees, but also, for example, if a vendor came in and was driving an EV, we would be able to allow them to have access to.
When did you start the program? How many years ago?
So I think we are into year 2. We started very slow. I remember we used just a couple of simple dual port charge point chargers. And then as we started to see adoption, we needed to have access. If people were going to use their car for their business purposes, it made sense to then have them to be able to charge and to get to the next location. We expanded it from the initial deployment.
And are visitors allowed to use it? I think you just said vendors are.
We do. Yeah, we let visitors if they've got an EV. I had a solar developer visited me last week, for example, and he had a Ford. He had a Lightning, and he needed a charge, and so he was able to get one.
And are they customers?
In that example, that person was not,
Generally.
but for the most part, they are. It's a lot of local that need access and are coming to do business with us.
Is that something you could track to talk about benefit to customers?
We would have to go back into the data to determine. We haven't done it exhaustively. To be honest, we thought one was workplace, but the other was, I mean, there is an end to this whole thing, which was to use the data ultimately to figure out how we could begin to start to manage workplace charging, how that would, it's essentially a way to shape load, et cetera.
Well, that's actually where I was headed, about the learnings from that and documenting and what might be next. I did hear Mr. Kassam say earlier, the adoption of EVs in South Carolina has been slower than he expected. But I guess what's next? What do you anticipate in terms of using that data and what might be offered going forward?
Yep. Just a couple of points. I think, in my prior testimony, this commission in the electric transportation docket, I talked a lot about managed charging. And although a lot of my emphasis was on managed charging at the residential level, the one thing we are seeing an uptick in is workplace and what I would call marketplace charging. And so I think what's going to happen is it's going to allow us to get ahead of that curve. I don't think it's going to materially change the fact that almost all charging still gets done, at least 80% likely gets done at home. But I think there's access to level 2 charging. In our last work that we did with our consultant on the modeling, they've identified an uptick, which we see too. So I think that's going to be a place where we're also ultimately going to have to focus on how do we manage workplace and retail and that type of charging also. It's not an immediate concern, but I'd rather get ahead of the curve than all of a sudden find out that's putting additional peak megawatt hours on the system.
And are there lessons learned that the company has mastered in terms of managing charging stations? Tips that you might include in future programs, or that you'll be standards or metrics you'll be looking to use? And if so, what might those be?
Yeah, I think there are a couple things that I think of that they're immediate. One is when I was on the campus yesterday, there are people that, they're dwellers that are, they hit a state of charge of 80% and they stay there too long, and then it doesn't leave someone else who comes in the ability to use a charger. So, I mean, that's one piece of it if you're in the marketplace charging arena. I think the other is we've identified some features of control where during peak time periods or all ports being utilized, it's essentially sharing, where you're reducing the amount of input into the charge, into the vehicle, and creating some level of conservation. It's not a perfected concept, but I think we're starting to think about what benefits we could derive, in the event workplace and marketplace type of charging. So that same type of charging, if you think about it, that same type of charging applies to maybe the most underserved area, which is multifamily, townhouses and condos who don't have garages. So that these same concepts that we're thinking about in workplace, they're going to be applicable to those types of situations too.
And just then, when you spoke of peak times for charging or peak charging, did you mean the company's peak usage overall, or did you mean EV charging wise, that all the ports were being used?
So I've actually become accustomed now. I used to only think of peak as the company peak, but I actually think of it as those two
Combined.
Systems, and thinking of them as how they actually fit together. So when I think of peak, I would Mr. Kassam would call me a heretic if I didn't think of peak of utility peak.
Okay.
But I think we also have to think of the e-mobility and when those peaks occur and how those two fit together.
And so which were you speaking of?
Yeah, I was thinking
Company
of peak
peak.
of company. Yes,
Okay.
correct.
Okay. Any lessons learned in terms of reliability, or is that,
No, that's
I can imagine that you all can't deal with a customer coming up and wanting to charge and they're not working, but I know in the private sector, that's a thing.
There's a, and this is part of my actually prior testimony in another docket. We
Right.
spent a lot of time talking about reliability, and even in rolling out workplace charging, and it's helped us in terms of they expect when you pull in and you back in and you plug in, they expect it to work.
Right.
And we think of it, so we're taking the operational mindset that exists for the entire grid. We take the same mindset when it comes to those types of devices, with that we are adamant about reliability time. And quite frankly, we've had a couple of chargers to fail, and it's immediate responsiveness in terms of replacement and making sure you've got something there that does work, because people expect it, they need it.
And I'm sure you all have to meet that standard, but are there lessons learned that will help as the private sector begins providing that charging?
Yeah, so, we do have an on-bill financing program where we do provide level 2 charging. And so that's the same, whether we provide that investment in that part of the business model or somebody else does. It's absolutely about making sure the charger works. I mean, we've got to make sure, obviously, the energy delivered to that charger works, but we've also got to make sure that charger that's to me the one big takeaway.
Is that something that, there's probably no AMI there, but something like AMI tells you and would tell a private sector individual when the charger isn't working?
You will know typically on a network
Okay.
charger almost immediately. Yeah.
Well, of course you would. I'm just focusing on the transfer to the private sector, but I hear you saying that they would know as well. So, thank you very much. I appreciate the panel being here. I have no further questions.
Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you. Mr. Cassis, you mentioned something that I found a little bit interesting. You were talking about there at the office campus and the EVs coming in and people plugging in to charge and basically overstaying their welcome is the way I would put it. Become pretty well charged and sit there forever. Is there any technology available that can notify the EV owner, driver, that they need to move it?
So the technology that I currently use is I might actually put a sticky on your window and tell you not to be there if you're already charged. So that's going to be, ultimately, I can't think of any. A driver knows I can look at my app, my phone, and you'll know. You'll get signalizations, you're at 80% of whatever you set for the maximum state of charge. I think that's, but also if you own the chargers, you also have the ability to also understand it's no longer charging that asset and deploy whatever means to be able to get them to move. I think generally, I think generally people recognize that there should be common courtesy. And if you're charged, I did it last night, I charged in the garage in Columbia, and they had a 5-hour limit. And so I went and got my car and moved it out of the spot just in case somebody was going to move it. I think people operate under that. But I think we also, as more and more vehicles are put in service, EVs are in service, there's going to be if we don't build out the infrastructure, then I think that is going to become a problem.
All right. And Ms. Shelton, you've talked a good bit about what's going on and has occurred to try to provide assistance to the low-income customers. And I'm wondering two things. One, is there anything that you believe this commission can do to move things forward that might benefit or help low-income customers more? Is there anything we should do? And secondly, do you have any ideas or thoughts on a go-forward basis that the company can or should be pursuing to help the low-income customers?
Well, I'm very happy to, I'm probably going to be in front of the commission again very shortly. On June 28th, we filed the DSM 5-year extension, which includes a low-income program, our extension to our low-income program. It has a significant increase to the low-income program, and that was prior to the settlement where we're adding the $3.5 million to the settlement. So,
well, if it's more appropriate to talk about it then that's just fine.
okay.
But if anyway, I'm gonna leave that up to you.
I'm excited about that. So you're gonna hear it. I'm gonna be glad to present then too. So.
All right. Well, then look forward to hearing you then. Thank you.
Any further commissioner questions? Vice Chair Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Shelton, quickly, I just want to unpack your testimony regarding, I believe, the PIP percentage of income, percentage of
Payment plan.
Okay.
PIP.
PIP. What does the I stand for?
Income. Percentage
Income.
of
Percentage of
income
income.
payment plan. Yeah.
Okay. And could you quickly give a briefing of what that plan is, what it entails?
So we don't have a plan like that in South Carolina, but in Ohio, in Dominion, Ohio, they did have a similar plan. I don't know all the details because I was not involved in all the stakeholder process, but it was where they determined that a customer would pay a rate based on their income. And overall, in South Carolina, to do offer a plan like that, it would require cost shifting.
Okay.
And so, for one group of customers to benefit from that program, other customers would have to pay more.
Right.
So it would be a program available to customers based on their income.
Right. So let's just drill down a little bit more. And the reason I want to take a little time on this is I don't know if you were at the public hearings or not, but a consistent theme was some level of program loosely for low-income members of the community and elderly members of the community on a fixed income. If you were not there, I'm sure you've heard something to something that some level of testimony regarding those two groups of our community, low income and fixed income members of the community. Are you aware of that type of testimony coming out of the public hearings?
Absolutely. So
Okay.
I did not attend the hearings, but I am in constant communication with our customer service, and I read the transcripts, and I actually listened to the Columbia hearing and the Charleston.
Outstanding.
And I will tell you that the Charleston hearing, I was not there, which I normally would have attended, but I was at a neighborhood energy efficiency program kickoff. We had one in Branchville. The neighborhood energy efficiency program is our low income program, so maybe I should have said that, and I did not, so I apologize for that. It is offered to customers that are it's based on census data, and we offer it to customers that are at or below 200% of the poverty level. So we go into a community, And we try to target, and we happen to be in Branchville right now. Earlier this year, we were in Hopkins, off of Garner's Ferry, Hopkins area. And we did Haskell Heights late last year. But right now we're in Branchville and Harleyville, and we're going to be in the Orangeburg area. But we offer that program to low-income customers, and we don't income qualify any individual. It's all based on census data. And we try to target as many customers as possible, trying to reach 70% of the customers. We involve churches, we involve the fire chief, the police department, any community members, the mayor, anybody that will let us come, and we hold a big kickoff and invite the entire town to come. We send them a postcard and invite them to the kickoff. And so the night of the Charleston hearing, that's actually where I was. So it's not that I didn't want to come. That's, the neat kickoffs I always make sure that if I'm available, I try to attend the neat kickoffs. So we do have our low-income customers, and I did hear the concerns. So that program is designed to we really try to target the largest number of customers and provide direct installation of measures to as many customers as possible in those communities. That means removing incandescents and installing light bulbs, pipe wrap, water heater turn down, education about their thermostat. Matter of fact, we do a presentation at that meeting and explain the importance of adjusting your thermostat. And, I heard a lot that people, and I saw it on Facebook. I actually looked at the Facebook comments as well. Because, these are our customers. And, I understand 78 is 78 degrees, that people think that's hot. They think that's hot. But we give them advice in these kickoff meetings, adjust at 1 degree. And we explain why, and we show them a chart that says just 1 degree can make a difference. And if you can handle that 1 degree, try another degree. Just simple steps that are really free DIY steps. We also provide so many installations, faucet aerators, shower heads. I'm going to forget so many. I know that I'm going to leave today and forget all the measures that I want to say, but we do a great deal of measures that we install. And then when we're in that community, we also assess the highest energy users. The mobile homes that are the highest energy users, we do full weatherization too. And it's free to the customer. It's about $3,800 worth of measures that we install, belly board, insulation, the whole 9 yards, air sealing, duct insulation. And the last 2 years, we've come close to about 300 mobile homes across our service territory. We try to split it up. And we agreed through the advisor group late last year to start single-family homes. And I think we're up to around 70 single-family homes or site-built homes. And we'll continue. We hope to have 150 site-built homes. So we'll continue to do that. The settlement money will probably expand on that number, which is wonderful. But when I hear those customers, a lot of those customers got referred back to us. So if they are not in a NEEP neighborhood, and sometimes they're not in a NEEP neighborhood, the customers, they will get referred to our Home Energy Checkup program. So the Home Energy Checkup is a version of our program. It's run by BPI certified team of Dominion Energy employees that provide a very, very similar service that our low-income program provides, except it's our employees who have access to our bills, can do 2 years of history review with the customer, print off their bills and explain their usage and how weather affects their bills, and they go straight into the customer's home and do direct installation of measures too. They also have, provide a virtual visit, and we offer that to customers too if they have a newer home or maybe already have LEDs. So I certainly was listening and picking that up to the customers, because some of those customers actually referred to us, right after the visit. So I was absolutely in tune to that. Keller mentioned at one point, I think every employee should go to a NEAP kickoff. I really believe it. I believe every employee should go. I wish I could invite y'all. Keller has said that as well. I wish I could invite y'all to a NEAP kickoff. I probably can't do that, but that's where you really truly see the value of our programs. The customers are so appreciative, and they were the opposite of what you hear at the public hearings, because the customers are so appreciative. We give a year's supply of filters to customers as well. That's a big one. That's and they get the education piece too.
So let me apologize. I asked a very poor line of questioning, but I appreciate your compassion and empathy for low-income members of our community. And to be clear, I have no concern at all about the company's EE or demand-side management programs. I want to flesh out a point about the PIP program.
Oh,
That's what I want to talk
I did
about.
go on a spin, didn't I?
No,
I tend to do that about the DSM program.
You
Sorry.
gave a very thorough answer, and no one should have any more questions about DSM or EE programs, in my opinion. But I just want to talk about the PIP for a second. Oh, well. We tried.
I could talk all day about it.
Right.
So
A recurring thing that I remember from the public hearings is the concept of some type of program, and I'm using the word program loosely, that essentially aids and assists low-income members of the community with their monthly electric bill. And what I'm hearing from you through that stakeholder engagement process, it was determined that a program like that, PIP or whatever you want to call it, is not consistent with South Carolina law as it relates to the utility regulatory scheme that the company operates within.
that is my understanding of how it would need to go through the General Assembly.
Right. So
Yes.
regardless of what the company would want to do regarding a assistance program of that nature, or regardless of what the commission may want to order the company to do when it comes to a program of that nature, it's not congruent with the law. Essentially, it would be illegal based on the cost shifting or the subsidization that would occur to fund such a program. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Someone would have, some other customer who's not benefiting from the program would have to pay for the program. Is that a fair statement?
That is correct.
Okay,
That
thank
is
you. That's
correct.
that's all I had. Thank you so much.
Chair Powell.
Commissioner Cast,
Actually, I don't have an EEDSM question, but it's more follow-up or build on that. I think you said Dominion, Ohio had a PIP program in place. Do you know how long that's been in place?
I do not.
So you wouldn't know any data, any information, like any results or?
Subject to TET, I believe it may have ended.
I thought your testimony to me was it did not exist anymore. in
Yeah,
Ohio.
I do believe it does not exist anymore.
Well, because here in the description of what that is, does the company have, other than there are certain statute limitations to doing things, but would the company have any concerns about incentivizing something that would not encourage energy conservation or turning it down? In other words, any programs that, no matter how good they sound in nature, it would not encourage folks to bump the thermostat up one more degree or down, or use less electricity. Is there a concern, does the company have any concern with any programs that may be like that?
No, in fact, our new, do we have, let me make sure I answer the question correctly. Are you asking, do we have any programs that would we be concerned about programs that ask customers to conserve energy versus energy efficiency? Or they use less energy?
No, I butchered that. I know you have those programs. Let me just take all that back and act like I didn't ask anything. I look forward to hearing more detail in the next time we see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, panel. Seeing no more lights up here, I would tell you can step down. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Mr. Chair, before the company presents its last panel of Sam Shannon and Alan Rooks, I'd like to recall Mark Lindley to make one clarification in regard to a question from, I believe, Commissioner Carol Lee Williams.
You certainly may. Mr. Lindley, you're still under oath.
Yes, sir. Yes, and Commissioner Williams, I apologize. I wanted to correct an answer to one of your questions. And your question was regarding the major maintenance accrual and the $683,000. In the settlement agreement, we did change that amount, and it actually became a decrease of $180,000. So that was the settlement term. And it was, to just a little more background, that adjustment that we proposed including the Fairfield pump storage station, which was accepted. We also proposed a 10-year maintenance cycle. And as part of the settlement process, we agreed to an 8-year cycle. And that the result of that was a decrease in that expense rather than an increase. So just wanted to correct that. So apologize again.
Clarification, is that 180,000 less than the 683, or was it a
decrease to that
Overall.
accrual overall? So,
Okay.
so whatever the math is, 630 plus 180 was the delta.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now turn it back over to Mr. Ziegler.
Mr. Chairman, the company would call Alan Rooks and Sam Shannon to the stand.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
I'll begin with Mr. Shannon. Would you please state your name for the record?
Sam Shannon.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Guidehouse. I'm an associate director in our regulatory strategy and pricing group.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your direction 24 pages of direct testimony that was pre-filed with the commission in this proceeding?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or additions to that testimony?
No.
If I ask you all the questions in that testimony, would your answers from the stand today be the same?
Yes.
Are there any exhibits to that testimony?
Yes.
And that exhibit is Exhibit RSS1, is that correct?
Correct.
Any changes to that exhibit?
No.
Mr. Chairman, at this time I'd move the pre-filed direct testimony and exhibits of Mr. Shannon in this proceeding be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
pre-filed direct testimony of Witness Shannon will be submitted into evidence as if given orally from the stand. The exhibit RSS1 will be exhibit number 19 and will be received into evidence.
Very good. Mr. Rooks, please state your name for the record.
Alan Rooks.
By whom you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Dominion Energy Services as a manager of regulation for Dominion Energy, South Carolina.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your direction 24 pages of direct testimony that's been pre-filed with the commission in this proceeding?
Yes, I did.
Are there any changes or additions to that testimony?
No.
If I ask you all the questions contained in your pre-filed testimony today, would your answers from the stand be the same?
Yes, they would.
Mr. Chair, at this time, I would move the pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Rooks to be entered into the record of this proceeding as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of Witness Rooks, consisting of 24 pages, will be submitted into evidence as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Rooks, I understand that there are exhibits AWR1 through AWR6 that are attached to your direct testimony. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Are there any changes or corrections to those exhibits?
No, there are not.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that the 6 exhibits I just mentioned be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
AWR 1 through 6 will be entered into the record and received as exhibit number 20.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Shannon, did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your direction 9 pages of rebuttal testimony that was pre-filed with the commission in this proceeding?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any changes or additions to that testimony?
No, sir.
If I ask you all the questions contained in that testimony today, would your answers from the stand be the same?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, at this time I would move the pre-filed rebuttal testimony of Mr. Shannon to be entered into the record of this proceeding as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed rebuttal testimony of Witness Rooks, consisting of 9 pages, will be submitted into evidence as if given orally from the stand.
I believe that was Witness Shannon.
I'm sorry, Witness Shannon. I'm sorry.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. Are there exhibits to your rebuttal testimony, Mr. Shannon?
Yes, sir.
And that's exhibit RSS2, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Chair, are there any changes or corrections to that exhibit?
No, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I would move exhibit RSS2 into the record at this time.
RSS2 will be accepted into evidence and will be exhibit number 21.
Mr. Rooks, did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your direction 21 pages of rebuttal testimony that was pre-filed with the commission in this proceeding?
Yes.
Are there any exhibits to that testimony?
No, there are not.
Do you have any changes or additions to it?
No.
If I ask you all the remaining questions in that testimony, would your answers from the stand today be the same?
Yes, they would.
Mr. Chair, at this time I would move the pre-filed rebuttal testimony of Mr. Rooks be entered into the record of this proceeding as if given orally from the stand.
Pre-filed rebuttal testimony of Mr. Rooks will be submitted in evidence as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will now tend to the witnesses for questions from the commission.
Thank you. Okay. Commissioner C. Williams.
Thank you, Chair Powers. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the education you're going to continue to give me. Mr. Rooks, you're expecting a question, I think, and it has to do with the we use the 1,000 kilowatts per month as a easy rule of thumb kind of multiplier. What's the actual average residential kilowatt usage per month?
Okay, so during our test year, it was 991 kilowatt hours a month.
Interesting. I'm glad I asked. What has it been over time?
You know, we looked at that going into the case, and it's ranged between 1,000, 1,100. And, you know, that can be driven by things like weather, the additions that are coming on the system, you know, whether they're, a large portion of condominiums, apartment, what we call multifamily type dwellings being added to the system. So it can vary depending on a lot of different things. But for this particular test year, it was our residential average use per month was 991 kWh.
And if a lot of multifamilies coming online, does that drive the number down because they're smaller? Okay.
If you weight it, most of those apartments,
Right.
Condominiums, they tend to be smaller.
Right.
They tend to be, as multifamily buildings, they share walls, ceilings.
Right.
And so their usage characteristics are a little bit different than what you would see with standalone housing. So yeah, if you're adding more of those, I would expect to see that average fall slightly.
Okay. My next question for you has to do with basic facility charges. And, I believe that you indicate that the actual cost to, for example, serve a residential customer might be close to $25 a month. Is that?
Yeah, that sounds about right, subject to check, yes.
And I know, we talk about this sometimes in a really precise way, and then sometimes they're more general kind of numbers. But I guess, when do you decide to actually use the causation, the actual cost versus the numbers that we have been using?
So that gets into a little bit of the art of rate design, right? So when we go in and we form our application, we review those numbers that come out of the cost of service. And we refer to those as the unit cost for customer-related charges or costs incurred in the cost of service. So we review that each time we come in and file a rate case application. What we propose is generally not going all the way to that level. We take a graduated step kind of in between there and try to increase it. But, as we get in settlement discussions, that becomes an important point to some interveners, right? So that becomes one of the commission or one of the provisions that gets compromised on. So while that might inform our judgment as to what proposal to make, once each case starts, it takes on its own kind of set of important issues for each party. And obviously that's one that's important to certain parties to the proceedings each time we have a case like this.
And I understand what the settlement is, and it's more about, I guess I'm asking more from the perspective of, it seems like generally you try to, it's valuable for people to understand what the actual cost is and for there not to be cost subsidization. And is the company over time, are we likely to see this request again where the BFC is closer to the actual? Is that a goal of the companies?
So I think long term, I want to kind of approach this from a line of discussion I've heard within the company. It's not that the rates are not cost-based. So I want to be clear about that. We come before this commission, we lay out all of our costs. We have a hearing to discuss all the merits, demerits. Everything that we have here is cost-based. Now, do the rates recover it in a manner that is in the most economically efficient way to go about recovering those charges? Maybe not. We have a lot of fixed costs on the system. And those costs are generally assigned to customers through energy charges. So over time, you would like to see that BFC come more in alignment with the actual customer costs. But then, probably what some of the parties to this proceeding would say is they would debate maybe our calculation of those customer costs. And you saw some testimony to that effect from us and from the other parties to this proceeding. So there are varying opinions on what should make up those customer costs. But what I would say to you is that over time, if we're going to recover costs in a manner that matches up with how those costs are being caused, then that rate or that BFC is going to have to increase over time. And what I tried to do and present in my one of my exhibits in my testimony was just to inform the commission as to what the customer-related charges are for other utilities around the state. And you can see that we're towards the bottom end of that. So I think, I'm not saying that that's used as a justification for or against anything that we're trying to do here. I'm just saying that what it informs me of is that probably from our cost of service standpoint, it doesn't look like we're far off the mark in the kinds of numbers that our cost of service is throwing off, if that makes sense.
Would you try to say that another way? You lost it. Just that last sentence is what lost me.
So you remember how I discussed the unit cost and the cost of service. So that's a cost of service will divide or classify, I guess, cost among demand-related, customer-related, or energy-related. So the best example for energy-related cost is fuel. If customers consume a kilowatt hour, then we incur a fuel cost to generate that kilowatt hour. So that's the best example of an energy or variable cost. Then you have customer-related costs, cost to render a bill each month. Each customer has a meter. Each customer has a transformer. So those are things that don't necessarily change. Now they may be sized differently with customers that, compared to their load, but you have those types of customer costs, and then you have demand-related costs. And those can be transformer-related to portions of the system related to generation, transmission, distribution. And so all of these costs go in these buckets. And that unit cost attempts to parse it out and say roughly, if you were doing cost recovery and pricing on the same terms, you'd like to see your BFC be maybe $25 in the example we've been talking about. Right. The energy might be fuel. In our case, I think our fuel factors right now would be around $30, give or take, of that 1,000 kilowatt hour bill. And then the rest would probably be comprised of some sort of a demand charge. And then, and so that's, again, that's in a cost of service world, right? But then there are real world implications. Do customers even understand a demand charge?
Right.
And probably as utilities, we have not done a very good job of educating customers on this concept of demand. But I am aware that there are utilities in the state that charge their customers on a demand basis and have demand charges on bills. I'm one of them.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the tutorial, the background, and and I'm asking more from the continuum over time, what to expect going forward perspective, not as much about this particular circumstance.
And there are certainly numbers that are generated by a cost of service model, and then there are the real world interpretation and application of those numbers too.
Right.
So
I understand. Thank you. Mr. Shannon, I'm interested in having a conversation about the time of use rates and just an understanding of maybe cause and effect. At least as I see it, there's a, or maybe it's effect and effect. There's an effect on the company, and then there's an effect on certain users. And so when you determine the average hourly dispatchable generation required, this is a particular question. Why was nuclear excluded? I went off topic for a second.
We excluded nuclear because it's, for all intents and purposes, it's always on. And so we excluded that because it's not as dispatchable per se as a coal plant or a gas plant or some other fossil facility.
Okay. Because it can't follow and respond to the solar load.
Precisely.
Okay. And is it, what were the intended effects or goals of what was originally proposed for the time of use rate structure?
The main goal was to have the time of use rates reflect the underlying system cost profile that the utility has when generating energy. So if there are times when it is going to be more expensive to produce that energy, those are the times that should be in the on-peak time period. If there are times when it's less expensive, then we'd have lower prices for customers in those times. But it's to get those two things to line up so that the actual times that they pay more reflects the times when it actually costs more.
So we're back to kind of cost causation again. And so based on your original submittal, the 4 to 8 p.m. time is what your data says is the most costly time to serve?
In the original
In the original,
that was
right.
the 6 to 10 p.m.
Okay,
48 was the settled agreement.
thank you.
But yes, that was when we looked at that heat map that was in one of the exhibits. That's when we said, roughly speaking, across all the different months, that's the time in which we see more of that dispatchable generation come online. And so that's when we wanted to move that time of use on peak period to those later hours.
And what is, just for the record, what is driving that shift and that more expensive time to occur in that time frame, in the 6 to 10 time frame?
Mr. Kassam actually touched on a little bit earlier today. It's the fact that the sun is going down and the solar generators on the utilities or in the utilities portfolio is starting to come down. And as that comes down, especially in the summer when you have, it's still hot outside at 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m. and later, that load to serve doesn't go away either. So as the solar production comes down, you have to ramp up fossil generation to continue to serve that load.
And is it your opinion that Dominion is trying to discourage solar?
No.
I think that's it. There's still questions in my head, but I think if someone else is going to ask, I may have another question for you.
Of course.
Mr. Cast?
I actually had no questions until Commissioner Carolee Williams asked one, but going back to the kilowatt hour usage for the test year, it was, what was it, 900, 990?
991.
Pretty precise. And that's an average?
That's average.
Mm-hmm. When I think about the water-saving devices, water devices, when federal government stepped in and said we're going to have water conservation, water-saving devices, back in the 90s, I can't remember when, but there was a precipitous drop in per capita usage, significant. And it's been my understanding from various and sundry hearings that y'all have heard me say this ad nauseum because I've asked it, that there seems to be, it's ubiquitous that almost every appliance, HVAC, everything that's electric is much more efficient than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely it is. I think building codes are tighter, and the homes being built now are a lot tighter as well. So that's a credit to the building and construction community.
Well, the reason I'm asking all that is because, I definitely saw that trend on the water side. I mean, population was going up. It was increasing in 1990, 2000, especially in the area I was familiar with. But the per capita usage was actually going down, and it was, a relatively flat line. Industrial changed it. But I'm saying all that to ask this. You said that was just for the test year, but the test year was kind of like just a few months ago, right? September to September. Is that?
It ended September 30th of 2023, so we're coming up on a year.
So
Too long.
I guess what I'm asking is, and I'm assuming the company does this, but looking at, population growth, I think we heard was about 1.7% plus or minus in South Carolina. The demand itself has been relatively flat. But such as the average kilowatt hour usage for residential, commercial, industrial would be different, I think. What does Dominion plot that?
Yes, yes, we absolutely keep up with that.
What does that line look like over the last 5-10 years?
I think from my conversations with our forecasting folks, resource planners, it's been slightly declining over
And
time.
do you believe that is, why do you think that is?
I think going back to what I said earlier, I know growing up, being a lifelong resident of the state, I'm amazed as I drive around and see the number of apartment complexes that have sprung up around town. And those in Columbia, for student housing. And then as you go down to Charleston and see the development there, multifamily housing and that sort of thing, that's way more prevalent on our system now than when I was growing up. So I think you have a lot of that housing stock that's contributing. I think you have builders, and the building codes are more stringent, and builders are building tighter homes, which is a credit. We're using better windows, better materials with insulation. Duct work is being done better. HVAC systems are more efficient. The appliances are better. I mean, that's a credit, right? We should all as a society want to make the best use of our resources that we can. And so, as I take all of those things into consideration, I think that's driving what you're seeing from an average use standpoint.
Well, I know water's not electric, but very similar. It seems like very similar outcomes appear to be occurring over time based on what you're saying, but that's just that one anecdote. So what I think I'm hearing is, although population is increasing in the state of South Carolina, I think we lead the country, as I understand it, about 1.7% per year. I think I heard that somewhere. But at least as far as Dominion, South Carolina, for probably a multitude of reasons, energy efficient appliances and everything electric, better construction methods. And you're saying because of multifamily dwellings that would be newer, not the older, because apparently older's.
Yeah, and again, I this is observations from me. I don't have the empirical data to back it up, and I think there are other things at play here. But from my observation, those are things that I see and observe, and I think they're real.
But other than your observations, at least the data that Dominion has relative to plotting out average residential usage demand, it's on a declining trend in less than 5 years ago or 3 years ago.
Yes, that's what I hear, and that's on a weather normalized basis. So not accounting for any weather plus or minus in any given year, but that's what I'm hearing.
Good enough. Thank you. No more questions.
Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you. And Mr. Rooks, I'm just going to kind of touch on the same topic I've been talking about with low-income customers. And do you have any thoughts as to additional actions that the company can or should be taking or moving forward into the future, or anything that this commission perhaps should do that would help the low-income customers?
So I would say, we've listened very intently during the 9 hearings and the public hearings that we've had in this case. We've read the letters of protest, and we understand very keenly that a lot of folks are struggling in our service territory. We hear it, we're aware of it, and what I'd say, I think, is I think Ms. Shelton summed it up well. That I think that it's kind of a societal issue. And I think the leadership from that is going to have to come from the General Assembly because, as she stated, if there's one group of customers that's going to pay less, then somebody else is going to have to pay more. And so, to me, that's a decision that rests maybe with the General Assembly. And I'm not, I'm not sitting in your seat, so I don't know the means of advocacy and the things that this commission could do, but perhaps, making those conversations known to the General Assembly. But, I say as this company that, if they bring that forward and they decide that that's the will of the state of South Carolina, then we're going to be about it. And we're going to figure out the best way to bring that to customers. But we think that's a societal issue, and that probably best rests with the General Assembly to figure out whether that's needed and how it would be implemented.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. That's all I have.
Chair Powers. Thank you. I'm sorry to do this, but this will get my prior questions about time of use kind of make a little bit more sense. And it may not be anything that you can answer, but it reflects the conundrum that I see for, I understand your need to plan for the company's peak usage and the cost associated with that. But the conundrum for me is that private citizens have made an investment of rooftop solar, and is it fair to change the financial calculations for them? And again, this is irregardless of the settlement agreement. It's more about just understanding for going forward. Is it fair to make a change that then changes the financial return for those private investors? Anybody want to take that one on?
That's a tough question, because you talk about a population that exists that, these private folks, myself included. I have solar panels on my house. I've invested in that, and these other people have invested in improvements to their own house to put solar up. It's also just like a customer that buys an EV. That's another population. And so when we're doing this kind of broad rate design, we have to consider all of the different customer groups that we have out there, of which solar is one. And at the end of the day, when we're taking this kind of action, I would suggest that the main fairness and equity issue that we're trying to address is the one of aligning the prices with the costs, so that under a time of use rate, you pay more for when it is more expensive. Now, we have other means of fairness. Like we say, if you use more, you should pay more. And that's why we have volumetric pricing. And we have other low-income, programs around the country and within South Carolina that help with that stuff too. But for the purposes of a time of use rate specifically, it's all about making sure those prices are aligning. And for those solar customers, we understand that it may change the economics, but at the end of the day, whether you're on a time of use rate or not, or whether you have a time of use rate that changes, for a solar customer, the best economic kilowatt hour is the one that you generate that you use yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's always going to be the most beneficial kilowatt hour, is that one that you've made and generated for your own use at that instant. But you're right, it is a population that we know is out there, and it is one of many that we have to consider when we're making these kind of broad changes to time of use rate. If I made I brought up the EV customers, we have that super off-peak period.
Right.
Specifically to say, okay, look, we know that having an EV is going to increase your consumption, because you'll be charging at home, and so we're going to give a little incentive to charge overnight when it's plugged into the garage. So we do try to keep all of that in mind as we do an exercise like this, and that's why we had the good stakeholder participation at the beginning. I actually had a good comment, and I believe this was in my or the exhibit that had the meeting minutes in it. One of our participants actually pointed out that, hey, the change to the time of use rate, that actually might help with customers that want to put storage on, and that helps our system too. So we understand it is part of it, but it is one thing that we do try to consider as much as we can.
I appreciate how you said that, and what it leads me to think about is, should we ever be in a position where there are that many EV folks charging overnight, that's going to change the recommendation and the peak in unknown ways.
Correct.
And so those are other investments made privately that are maybe made with a calculation of what it will cost them that may change as the system needs change. Does that sound like I'm following what you said?
Yes, exactly right.
Okay.
That's right. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And I would add, Commissioner, is that, we're changing these time of use periods. And to just, witness Shannon's point, that is, we're looking to that next step where the capacity is going to be more important. And so this grid's evolving, and it's changed rapidly in the last decade that I've observed. And so it's important for us, and I think it's one of the things that we talk about in our shop is that we're going to have to take customers from a quantity-based mindset. It's still important. Don't get me wrong. Don't hear me wrong. It's important that we, use power efficiently, but it's going to be more important going forward that they understand the times of day when power is most abundant and when it's not. And I think that's going to drive this, and I think that's where it's important for us to start getting this correct, sending the right signal so that you incent the right technologies that are going to benefit the system going forward. As Mr. Shannon said, with batteries, that's going to be probably the next big step. And if we can get that battery in those evening hours where the solar is falling off and our generation has to ramp up, that's very important to us. And that's the kind of things, the kind of reactions we'd like to see. And then, maybe at a higher level, I'll just add that with time of use rates, they're behavioral. So there's an unknown element of this. We're putting these out there, and we're trying to incent behavior while recovering the revenue requirement, but we don't know. Nobody can say for sure how customers are going to react to this. But you heard Ms. Shelton say that our new DSM programs are coming before you. Mm-hmm. And one of those efforts is going to be around TOU education. Again, migrating customers from a mindset of maybe quantity is still important, but the time that the power is being used is equally as, if not more important going forward.
Thank you. I appreciate having a second opportunity to ask questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Belser, I'm sorry.
Mr. Rooks, you didn't think I was listening, but you just said we've got to start to get this correct. Are you telling me it hadn't been correct before now?
So what I would say is the TOU periods that have been in existence since the 90s, they were properly aligned with the grid, maybe at that point in time, but they're,
it's changed. I agree with you.
It's changed. The grid has changed on us, as I said, in the last decade a lot.
But these time of use periods aren't the ones that were recently done ever since Act 62 came in. You said that. Are you saying that those time of use periods that the commission approved after Act 62 were set in the 90s? They weren't updated after Act 62?
Absolutely. These
Okay.
rates, we would come in
I'm
a
talking
general
about-
rate proceeding. And so these time of use periods for our rates have not been updated since the 90s. And that's That
were
was
not
one of the issues
updated?
of urgency. So
They were not updated with the solar choice tariffs?
So the periods were not updated. Maybe we're talking. Maybe
I'm
we're
just
missing
under-
one
I'm just
another here. But
trying
the
to
rates have been updated themselves.
The
Just
rates
the
have.
periods.
That's what I'm asking about,
Yeah.
the periods. They have not been updated since then?
They've not been updated since the 1990s
That's, thanks for
at the
clarifying.
earliest.
All right.
It goes back further
So
than
you were
that.
correct. I was like, he just said we need to start to get this correct. And I was like, wait a minute. We've had some proceedings on these time of use periods for these solar folks, and that's what's peaked. Okay.
We haven't moved them.
The other thing that
And
makes
the world's
me,
different, so we're trying to address that now.
the other thing that makes me think about this is when I was in college and I'd have to wait till after 11 o'clock to call home because the rates were cheaper.
I can remember calling cards.
So, all right. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Burgess, it's my understanding that you would have three other witnesses, Mr. Felsenthal, Mr. Taylor, and Mr. Ludlow, and their exhibits, and that you will be submitting those without putting these witnesses up. If you choose to do that way, by verification, by affidavit, and that an affidavit will be filed for each testimony and for each of the sets of exhibits. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. And what I was going to do, just for completeness of the record, I was going to go ahead and move their testimony into the record along with their exhibits. And then we'll certainly follow up with the commission by submitting a verification into the commission's administrative file for those pieces of testimony as well.
All right. Well, then let me.
And I'm happy to go through them one at a time, that may
All right.
be the best thing to do.
Well, let's do it this way and see if this works. I would, the testimony of witness Felsenthal will be submitted in evidence as is given orally from the stand. Exhibit ADF 1 of Mr. Felsenthal will be Exhibit 22. Mr. Taylor's testimony will be submitted in evidence as if given orally from the stand, and exhibits JDT 1 and 2 will be number 23. And Mr. Ludlow's testimony will be submitted into evidence as if given orally from the stand, and his exhibits WHL 1 through 7 will be exhibits 24. Does that cover what you were going to submit? Or you have
Just
more?
one point of clarification. So it's the corrected direct testimony of William Ludlow, and it's the corrected exhibit WHL-1. And then Mr. Taylor had rebuttal testimony. So we just want to make sure that that's his direct testimony and his rebuttal testimony that's coming into the record.
All right. Also, Mr. Taylor's rebuttal testimony will be submitted into evidence as if given orally from the stand, and the existing exhibit number 24 as to WHL1 will be a corrected exhibit.
Mr. Chairman, I had a note too about WHL5 being corrected. I know y'all provided a enlarged copy, but was that also a corrected one?
Mr. Ludlow had 5 total exhibits,
Right.
2 of which were corrected, 1 and 5.
1 and 5.
1 and 5 will be taken as part of exhibit 24 as corrected.
I was wrong yet again. We had 7 total Ludlow exhibits.
Yes, 7
Thank
total.
goodness my paralegal is not shy to tell me from.
1 and 5 are the corrected
Those are the
versions.
corrected.
And those are accepted in as part of exhibit 24.
With that, Mr. Chairman, I think this record is perfect.
Well, this is my first case. All right. The one thing we didn't ask was there was no redirect on these last witnesses or no questions? at
No,
all?
sir, there's no
Okay.
redirect.
Would that be the company's case then?
Yes, sir, that concludes the company's case in chief, as well as its settlement case and its rebuttal case.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to take a 10-minute break, come back here at 4 o'clock. I think the 2 DCA witnesses, Rothschild and Dismukes, we will put them into the record at that time, the same way if that's suitable. And then I guess the first actual witness we would then hear from would be Witness Beach if he's available. Okay.
Yes, he will
All
be
right.
available to testify.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll be back at 4 o'clock. Thank you. Welcome back to the Public Service Commission. We're still on docket number 2024-34-E. We are at a point where we had the South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs. It's my understanding that your two witnesses would be Mr. Rothschild and Mr. Dismukes. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Would you like to submit their, I think Mr. Rothschild has direct and rebuttal testimony.
That's right, and we've already filed verifications for both of them.
Right.
So Mr. Rothschild has 139 pages. It's revised direct testimony that was filed on June 5th. The same day we had filed direct testimony, there was just some formatting issues, so we refiled it the same day. So it's the 139-page version that's labeled revised direct testimony. And that also included in addition to that, 24 pages of direct exhibits labeled ALR1 through ALR6.
All right.
And also with Mr. Rothschild had 33 pages of surrebuttal testimony filed July 3rd, and no exhibits associated with that. And then Dr. Dismukes, there were 60 pages of direct testimony filed on June 5th. And there was an attachment A, which was 80 pages, and exhibits DED1 through DED11. And then finally, he had 25 pages of surrebuttal testimony filed July 3rd, and 11 pages of exhibits to a surrebuttal labeled DED12 through DED16.
All right. So the direct testimony of Mr. Rothschild has been filed and verified by affidavit. Is that correct?
The verifications for both witnesses covered both sets of testimony. Yes, sir.
Okay. Both the direct and rebuttal.
Yes, surrebuttal. Yes.
All right. And as far as the exhibits, I think we can go ahead and mark them ALR 1 through 6 as number 25.
Okay.
Mr. Dismukes, DED 1 through 11 as 26. And DED 12 through 16 as 27.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next would be South Carolina Coastal Conservation League and Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. Ms. Mixon. Yes, she is. There you are.
You're all the way over there.
If you would, please call your witness.
Thank you, Chair Powers. The South Carolina Coastal Conservation League and Southern Alliance for Clean Energy call R. Thomas Beach to the stand.
Mr. Beach, would you raise your right hand, please? You swear the testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. Your witness.
Thank you. Mr. Beach, could you please restate your full name for the record?
Yes, my name is first initial R. Thomas Beach, B-E-A-C-H.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I am the principal consultant at Cross Border Energy, which is a consulting firm.
And Mr. Beach, did you cause to be pre-filed in this docket on June 5th, 2024, direct testimony consisting of 30 pages?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed direct testimony at this time?
No, I do not.
If the questions put to you in your testimony were asked of you at the hearing today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Chair Powers, I would move to have Mr. Beach's pre-filed direct testimony entered into the record as though given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of witness Thomas Beach will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you. And Mr. Beach, did you attach to your direct testimony one exhibit identified as exhibit RTB1?
Yes.
And was this exhibit prepared by you or under your direction?
Yes.
Chair Powers, I would move to have exhibit RTB1 as attached to Mr. Beach's pre-filed direct testimony entered into the record as the next hearing exhibit.
Weren't there 3 exhibits?
That's 1 through 3 or the way it's written.
Oh, My apologies. He had 3 exhibits marked as RTB 1 through RTB 3. We would ask that those exhibits be entered as the next hearing exhibit. Thank you.
Your mic isn't on.
Excuse me. RTB 1 through 3 will be entered into the record as Exhibit 28.
Thank you. Mr. Beach, did you also cause to be pre-filed in this docket on July 3rd, 2024, rebuttal testimony consisting of 7 pages?
Yes.
And do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed rebuttal testimony at this time?
No, I do not.
And if the questions put to you in your testimony were asked at the hearing today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Chair Powers, I would move to have Mr. Beach's pre-filed rebuttal testimony entered into the record as though given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed rebuttal testimony of Thomas Beach will be placed into the record as if given and submitted in evidence as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you. Finally, Mr. Beach, did you cause to be pre-filed this docket on July 15th, 2024, settlement testimony consisting of 5 pages?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed settlement testimony at this time?
No.
And if the questions put to you in your testimony were asked at the hearing today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Mr. Beach, I understand you've prepared a brief summary of your testimony for the commission. Could you please present your summary at this time?
Yes. Good afternoon, Chair Powers and members of the commission. My name is Tom Beach, and the purpose of my testimony in this proceeding was to evaluate Dominion's proposal to change its time of use, or TOU, periods. In my direct testimony, I evaluated 6 factors: Dominion's existing loads, their reliability metrics, their dispatch costs, cost of service, customer response, and ratepayer impacts. And based on that review, recommended that the commission should reject Dominion's proposed changes to the summer on-peak period, which would have changed the weekday summer on-peak period from 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. to the evening hours of 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. I also recommended that the commission limit Dominion's proposed winter on-peak periods to the months of December, January, and February. I did not contest Dominion's proposal to add a super off-peak period or to include May as a summer month. In my rebuttal testimony, I responded to witness Shannon's rebuttal defending Dominion's proposed time of use periods. I'm pleased that, as I discussed in my settlement testimony, my primary concerns have been resolved by the settlement agreement reached in this case. The settlement accepts several of Dominion's proposed changes to its time of use periods, such as the proposed changes to the winter on-peak period, the adoption of a super off-peak period, and the inclusion of May as a summer month. However, the settlement makes 2 key changes to Dominion's original proposal. First, it provides that weekends and holidays will not include an on-peak period for all rate schedules. And second, the settlement revises the summer on-peak period for residential rate 5 and rate 7 to the hours of 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. These revised summer on-peak periods of 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. address the concerns raised in my direct testimony and presents a reasonable, if not perfect, resolution to the issues raised in my direct testimony. First, Dominion's residential class loads peak at 6 p.m. in the summer months, which would be directly in the middle of the settlement's proposed residential on-peak period. This ensures that customers can take actions to shift or reduce their loads leading up to and including the hour of peak demand for the residential class. The on-peak period in the settlement is also a more incremental shift away from the status quo, which will help alleviate the rate impacts on residential customers who are on time of use rates. And it's better aligned with the time period that Dominion uses to allocate costs to customers based on their demands. Consequently, I believe that the TOU periods in the settlement are a reasonable resolution of the issues in this case. This concludes my summary. I appreciate the opportunity to give it.
Thank you, Mr. Beach. Chair Powers, the witness is now available for questions from the commission.
All right. Ms. Mixon, I think you and I forgot to put his settlement testimony into the record. And I would, the settlement testimony of witness Beach will be submitted evidence as given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Chair Powers.
Thank you. Commissioner questions? Commissioner C. Williams.
Mr. Beach, good to see you again. Thank you for being here.
Yes, nice to be here.
Were you able to listen to my conversation with witness Shannon and witness Rooks a few minutes ago?
Yes, I was listening.
Good, good. What is your response to the question of, is it fair to change the time of use rate structure on customers who have made a personal investment in rooftop solar, anticipating and projecting a financial return based on a prior rate structure?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that I think we do have to recognize that the system is going to change. A solar system that a customer installs may last for 25 or 30 years, and over that time period, of course, there are going to be changes on the electric system, and rate structures and rates will, including time of use periods, will need to adjust to those changes over time. However, your question's also correct that customers make investments, for example, in solar, in reliance on the time of use periods that are in effect when they make those investments. So I think the conclusion is it's important if it looks like you need to change the time of use periods, it's important to make those changes gradually and make them with including when you make those changes, look at the impacts on the customers who will be affected and try to mitigate any adverse impacts on those customers.
This may be already in effect with the company's time of use rates, but I'm wondering if you know this or if you know of examples in other with other utilities. Do the time of use rates indicate that they can be changed and that calculations should be made understanding that these tariffs can change in the future? I realize tariffs all have dates when they're approved and they kind of imply it. But what is the messaging like in other communities regarding this, the fact that these factors can change?
Yeah, I think that it's important to communicate that. And I do know that other states have, for example, consumer guides for customers who are thinking about purchasing a solar system. In some states, the commission has taken the lead in developing that kind of a guide. And that's a place where you certainly can educate customers that rates and time of use periods are not necessarily set in stone and can be modified in the future.
And in our state, that's done by the Office of Regulatory Staff in terms of the broader picture of good information related to the many decisions that need to be made by individuals related to solar. Are you aware of any other kind of lessons learned or examples, best management practices from other utilities in other states that might be helpful for us as we, all of the parties work on this communication and work on the understanding that this time of use and this grid, as was testified to earlier, is changing.
Yeah, I think, well, from my experience in California, which has a very high penetration of solar and where the whole kind of duck curve issue first arose, I think one thing that has been important is basically the commission in California adopted a statewide summer on-peak period of 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. And, California is a big state, geographically diverse. You probably could make a case that different utilities in the state could have somewhat different time of use periods. I think they all would be, but at the end of the day, they all would be somewhere around 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. And the commission made a decision probably 7 or 8 years ago when this issue was front and center in California to go to a consistent statewide 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. Summer on peak period. And although that may not be absolutely perfect for every utility, it does simplify the messaging. And for example, you can do statewide messaging around conserving energy during the on-peak period, and you only have to educate people about one time of use period for the whole state, rather than telling them that they have to consult their utility to find out exactly what their on-peak period is for their particular utility. So that's one idea is to try to coalesce around a single statewide on-peak period, and then just doing good customer education around so customers know when that is and what they can do to conserve energy during those hours.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your testimony and your answering my questions.
Mr. Beach, thank you for your testimony. You may step down. Ms. Mixon, you have two other witnesses as far as their testimony and exhibits. Could we go over those now?
Yes, thank you, Chair Powers. I'll start with the testimony of Jim Gravatt. He had 32 pages of direct testimony that was filed on June 5th. And along with that, he also had one exhibit to his direct testimony, Exhibit JG1.
The direct testimony of Jim Gravatt will be submitted in evidence as if given orally from the stand. The exhibit AL-1, JG-1 will be exhibit 29.
Thank you. Our next witness is Albert Lynn. He had 30 pages of direct testimony and one direct exhibit marked as Exhibit AL-1.
All right, Mom. The testimony of witness Albert Lynn will be submitted in evidence as if given orally from the stand, and the one exhibit of Albert Lynn known as AL-1 will be Exhibit 30 and submitted in evidence.
And then lastly, Mr. Lynn also filed 13 pages of surrebuttal testimony on July 3rd.
All right. The pre-filed surrebuttal testimony of Albert Lynn will be submitted in evidence as is given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Chair Powers, and that completes.
May I ask actually this is for DCA. May I ask a clarifying
Certainly.
question? I'm sorry. Mr. Rothschild's testimony had appendices and exhibits, and the appendices were like, I think A through F, but they were written. They would file his testimony. I wasn't not sure if those are part of the testimony going in the record or if that's part of the exhibit going in the record.
Yeah, the past few cases we've asked for those just to be part of his testimony because they do kind of.
I couldn't remember
supplement
what
and
we'd done.
Read like the testimony.
All right. Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. All right. CMC still had no witnesses. South Carolina Energy Users Committee, Mr. Elliott. You had two witnesses.
Yes, sir. Understanding that the commission does not require their testimony, I would move their testimony in at this time. First, with respect to Mr. Jeffrey Pollock, he pre-filed 23 pages of corrected direct testimony. And his, to Commissioner Belser's point, his testimony included 3 appendices, A through C. And I would move that in at this time.
All right. The corrected testimony and appendices A through C of Jeffrey Pollock will be submitted into evidence as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you. And then Mr. Pollock submitted 16 pages of surrebuttal testimony with 2 exhibits.
The pre-file surrebuttal testimony of Jeffrey Pollock, consisting of 16 pages, will be submitted into evidence as if given orally from the stand. And I think there were 2 exhibits, JPSR1 and JPSR2.
Yes, sir.
Those exhibits will be put in the record as Exhibit 31.
Thank you. Our second witness, Billy S. LeConte, filed direct testimony, pre-filed direct testimony with 2 exhibits. Nope, I beg your pardon. With appendices, I'm sorry. Appendices A and B and 4 exhibits.
All right. The direct testimony of Billy LeConte, along with appendices A and B, will be submitted into evidence as if given orally from the stand. The exhibit BSL1 will be exhibit 32 and submitted into evidence.
Thank you. Are there 4 exhibits to Ms. LeConte's direct testimony?
Yes,
2.
BSL 1 through 4.
Okay, thank you.
Or exhibit 32.
Thank you.
I think also you had some surrebuttal testimony.
Yes, sir. Ms. LeConte pre-filed 8 pages of surrebuttal testimony, and I think there were no exhibits.
All right. The pre-file 8 pages of surrebuttal testimony of witness LeConte, consisting of 8 pages, will be submitted to evidence as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you.
All right, sir. And the next witness, or the next group, would be the Department of Defense. Mr. McNutt, are you on the line?
There he is.
You must be muted. Mr. McNutt. Okay. Walmart. Ms. Perry.
Yes, Chairman. Walmart filed the direct testimony of Lisa V. Perry in this docket on June 5th, 2024, consisting of 30 pages. And it also filed, along with her direct testimony, exhibits LVP 1 through LVP 4, consisting of 23 pages. We would ask that that testimony be admitted into the record as if given orally from the stand.
All right. The direct testimony of witness Lisa Perry, consisting of 30 pages, will be submitted in evidence as if given orally from the stand. The exhibits LVP 1 through 4 will be put into evidence as Exhibit 33.
Then, Chairman, on July 3rd, Lisa V. Perry filed sir rebuttal testimony consisting of 6 pages without any exhibits. We would also ask that that testimony be admitted into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The sir rebuttal testimony consisting of 6 pages given by Lisa Perry will be submitted into evidence as if given orally from the stand.
And I would note for the bench's notice that Ms. Perry filed her verification with respect to all of those documents in the docket on July 12th, 2024.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, if I just may, I seem to recall some correspondence between Ms. Wheat and Mr. McNutt about verifications and that sort of thing. I didn't pay close attention to it, but the inference was that the DOD wanted to file these testimonies.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, we
Yes.
actually do have the verifications from 2 of our 3 witnesses. We're waiting on the 3rd one. We should have it in the morning.
All right, sir. And do you want to put their testimony into the record at this time?
Mr. Chairman, I do not have my witnesses available at this time. I can have them ready in the morning.
No, I don't need your witnesses. I think you have a Larry Blank direct testimony. Is that correct?
Yes, we have Larry Blank, Dr. Larry Blank, Maureen Reno, and a 3rd witness as well. We would like to get those admitted into evidence, please.
All right. The direct testimony of Larry Blank will be submitted in evidence as if given orally from the stand. He also appears to have exhibits LB FAS 1 and 2. Those exhibits will be put in the record as exhibits 33, 34. And I think there was sir rebuttal testimony, Mr. Blank.
Yes.
All right. The sir rebuttal testimony of Mr. Blank will be submitted in evidence as if given orally from the stand. You also had 2 other witnesses, Mr. Morgan.
Lafayette Morgan and Maureen Reno.
All right. The direct testimony of Mr. Lafayette Morgan will be submitted in evidence as if given orally from the stand. It's my understanding that there is also an exhibit LM 1 through 6, as well as curriculum vitae, which would be put into evidence as exhibit 35. There was sir rebuttal testimony from Mr. Morgan. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. The sir rebuttal testimony of Mr. Morgan will be submitted in evidence as if given orally from the stand. Ms. Reno, direct testimony. The direct testimony of witness Reno will be submitted in evidence as if given orally from the stand, along with Appendix A. It's my understanding that she submitted exhibits MLR 1 through 14. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. They will be placed into evidence as Exhibit 36. And there was sir rebuttal testimony?
Correct. It was short, but it was filed.
The sir rebuttal testimony of Maureen Reno will be submitted in evidence as if given orally from the stand. And is that it?
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you very much.
Appreciate the accommodation.
right. Mr. Frank Knapp had no testimony and has been excused from further attendance at the hearing. The only thing left is not the only thing, the Office of Regulatory Staff. We'll see.
Good afternoon,
See
Chair
how far
Powers.
we can get with you this afternoon and still take care of the town of Winsboro.
Yes, sir. With a little guidance from the commission on our witnesses, we would amend our order a little bit. And as our first panel, we would call Ms. Dawn Hipp and Ms. Liz Pardue to the stand.
Thank you.
Raise your right hand, please. You swear affirm the testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Great. Ms. Hipp, I'll start with you this afternoon. Could you please state your name for the record?
Good afternoon. My name is Dawn Hipp.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff as the Chief Operating Officer.
Thank you. And did you prepare or cause to be prepared corrected settlement testimony consisting of 4 pages pre-filed in this proceeding on July 15th, 2024?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your corrected settlement testimony?
I do not.
If I ask you the same questions today as posed in your corrected settlement testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Chair Powers, ORS would move the corrected settlement testimony of Ms. Hipp into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The corrected settlement testimony of Ms. Dawn Hipp will be submitted into evidence as if given orally from the stand.
Great. I'll turn to you, Ms. Pardue. Could you please state your name for the record?
Yes, Elizabeth A. Pardue.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by the state of South Carolina as an economist with the Office of Regulatory Staff.
Thank you. And did you prepare or cause to be prepared direct testimony consisting of 77 pages pre-filed in this proceeding on June 5th, 2024?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your direct testimony?
No, I do not.
If I ask you those same questions today as posed in your direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Chair Powers, ORS would move the direct testimony of Ms. Pardue into the record as if given orally from the stand. And I would note that there's both a confidential and a redacted version, and we would ask that that confidential version maintain confidentiality.
The direct testimony of Elizabeth Pardue, both confidential and public versions, will be admitted into evidence as if given orally from the stand. The confidential version shall stay confidential.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Pardue, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared 6 exhibits marked EAP1 through EAP6 that accompanied your direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
Chair Powers, ORS would also move exhibits EAP1 through EAP6 into the record as the next composite hearing exhibit.
The exhibits EAP 1 through 6 will be submitted into evidence as exhibit number 37.
Thank you. Ms. Pardue, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared 34 pages of surrebuttal testimony pre-filed in this proceeding on July 3rd, 2024?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed surrebuttal testimony?
No, I do not.
If I ask you the same questions today as you were posed in your pre-filed surrebuttal testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Chair Powers, ORS would move the surrebuttal testimony of Ms. Pardue into the record as if given orally from the stand, and I would also note that this is filed with both a confidential and a redacted version, and we would ask that the confidentiality be maintained.
The surrebuttal testimony of witness Elizabeth Pardue, both confidential and public versions, will be submitted into evidence as if given orally from the stand. The confidential version shall remain confidential.
Thank you. Ms. Pardue, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared 2 confidential exhibits marked Confidential Surrebuttal Exhibit EAP1 and Confidential Surrebuttal Exhibit EAP2?
Yes.
Do you have any changes to those exhibits?
No, I do not.
Chair Powers, we would ask that Confidential Surrebuttal Exhibit EAP1 and Confidential Surrebuttal Exhibit EAP2 be entered into the record as the next consolidated hearing exhibit, and that they be kept confidential.
The confidential EAP 1 and 2 will be put in evidence as Exhibit 38 and will remain confidential.
Thank you, Chair Powers. And with cross being waived, they're available for commissioner questions.
Thank you very much. Commissioner questions? Commissioner Thomas.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Afternoon.
So, Ms. Hipp, you've heard me asking about what can be done for low-income customers, and wanted to see if you had any other thoughts in terms of what the company could do or what the commission could do that perhaps should be considered in the future.
Thank you for that question, Commissioner. And I think you're hitting on a very important topic. I think there are definitely limitations for this commission and ORS. I sit in the call center at ORS, and so I do get to hear from customers on a daily basis. The highest number of customer calls that we receive now, and even in the shoulder months, of low electric use are related to payment difficulties of customers. And we often hear from customers that they are having difficulty not only paying their electric bill, but also with the cost of housing, the cost of food, the rising cost of health care, and all the other pressures that families face in the U.S. right now. And so we do our best to work with customers to arrange payment plans, spreading the costs out over a reasonable period of time, not adding to the arrearage balance that they have, or deferring the payment time, giving them an extra 2 to 3 days such that they could time their payment of utilities with a paycheck or when Social Security comes in. I think that the issue that low-income customers, and frankly all customers, struggle with is one of affordability, not just for electric service, but also for all the other critical services that they require. It is a socioeconomic issue for which this settlement agreement addresses by reducing the amount of the increase that customers will face. I also think another feature of the settlement agreement that you see is a $7.5 million one-time bill credit. And while over that large customer base, it may seem like a little, it definitely will help customers in the high usage months. In terms of looking at something more long-term related to electric rates, I would agree with the testimony that you've heard from the company. The exploratory study and discussion that was held under the 2020 settlement was a helpful kickoff to kind of base set knowledge. What are the pressures that customers are facing and what realistically can be done in the electric area? And what we see is that some of that is those fixes are going to need to come from the General Assembly. So our focus is on reviewing the case to make sure that customers only pay through rates for what is necessary to provide high quality, reliable electric service, and then mitigating that cost as much as we can.
All right, thank you, appreciate that. So, Ms. Perdue, in your direct testimony on page 54, you state that with respect to your ROE recommendation, you give preference to the discounted cash flow analysis because it better reflects current market conditions. And just wanted to get your input on that. Which do you think better takes market conditions into consideration, the CAPM or the DCF?
Certainly. Thank you for the question, Commissioner. I do feel that the discounted cash flow model, or the DCF, better reflects market conditions because a couple of the inputs, specifically the stock price and the dividends that create the dividend yield, as well as to an extent the growth rate, which is, if not historical, if it's projected, it is an estimated value. Those encompass the market conditions and investor expectations at the time the analysis was conducted. When we look at the CAPM, alternately, two of the three inputs into that model are estimates and are not as easy to nail down. That would be the beta and the ERP. And so that's why I feel that the DCF is more reflective of market conditions.
Commissioner Thomas, did you, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
Were you asking about the market condition or market risk? I wasn't sure I followed that as far as relative to the CAPM and the DCF.
Well, I was asking basically from the perspective of the investor, which would more clearly align with investor expectations. And so generally also then why can you name anybody else, any other ROE witnesses that remove the CAPM analysis from the ROE range?
There are certainly some. And in fact, in the record in this proceeding, witness Reno also ran both DCF and CAPM models, but ultimately relied on her DCF analysis for her recommendation.
All right, I think that's all I have for now.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Commissioner Caston.
Again, I want to make sure I understood, I guess, your response to Commissioner Thomas when he's asking, I think he asked you what takes market risk into account more in between the CAPM and DCF, and you said DCF.
So I do feel that the DCF takes into account current market conditions. When we talk about market risk specifically, both of these models are going to be incorporating that. Any risks that investors perceive are going to be influences into a company's stock price, for example, which is part of the DCF. When we look at the CAPM, as I believe you heard from witness Nelson earlier today, there is a risk factor specifically, that is the beta. It is a measure of risk for each of the companies in the proxy group relative to the risk of the overall market. And there is also a risk-free rate component in the CAPM, which is, of course, our proxy for as close as we can get to a riskless investment. They're backed by the U.S. Treasury, so they are fairly risk-free from that perspective.
Okay. And relative to beta, as I understand it, I guess it's kind of like specific gravity 1.0. It's kind of dead slick, and if it's above 1.0, is that perceived that that company has a greater risk or lesser risk?
You're correct, sir. So a beta of 1 would be equal to the market. So anything that we see with a beta above 1 is generally considered more volatile and thus more risky than the overall market. By that same token, when we look at anything with a beta below 1, they're less risky or less volatile. Regulated utilities tend to have betas below 1, which makes them less risky than the overall market.
All right. The less than 1 is the greater risk, you say?
Any beta that is below 1, so a 0.9, for example, would be less risky than the overall market.
Okay. So I just misunderstood you. I misheard you. And did you say that typically utilities like an electric utility like Dominion or Duke, are they of greater risk or lesser risk than the average non-utility company?
So relative to the market itself, they do tend to be less risky. As far as risk related to other companies, I would have to look at the betas, and I don't have those in front of me. But what I can say, for example, in the CAPM model that I ran and the analysis I provided, the betas for all of the proxy companies in my proxy group on average were 0.93, which is below market risk, less risky than the market.
All right, and I guess following up on Commissioner Thomas's question, we talked about on page 54 of your direct, where you said you just chose DCF. I mean, you kind of went from that to that, and I was trying to read down in the testimony, you know, what the deeper dive was going to be to kind of go through all that and explain it. And it may have been there, and I just didn't see it. But the market conditions you're talking about or referencing, is that for the test year, or what are those market conditions?
That's a very good question. I do think, generally speaking, the DCF is going to reflect market conditions better because of the inclusion of the inputs relative to the inputs that you would see in the CAPM. I did ultimately base my recommendation on my DCF model results, which was a range of 9.72% to 9.97%. And I would also note that that range does fall within my CAPM range as well.
Yes, ma'am, I understand that. I saw that. But I guess what I'm asking, I'm not sure, maybe that answered it and I just missed it. Well, you said you give preference to the results of my DCF analysis since the DCF better reflects current market conditions. What I'm asking, when those current market conditions, when is that? Was that the test year? Do you look at previous 5 years? You're looking at next year, this year? What does that mean?
I understand. Thank you, sir. It would be the market conditions at the time of my analysis. So for this rate case, my data cutoff was May 15th, 2024. So at that time, based on the inputs that were going into my models and the results that came out of my models, that would be the time period for the current market conditions. And I will note as well that some of these data points do include different time periods. For example, the stock prices that I use to develop my dividend yields, that is based on an average of the most recent 30 days up to and including May 15th of this year. Some of my growth rate inputs are historical and include, for example, 5-year historical trends, and the projections that are included as part of the growth rates for both earnings per share, dividends per share, and book value per share are projected out 5 years. So there are some different time periods that are being included, but it would be the most recent data as of my data cutoff.
And I don't, relative to Ms. Nelson's earlier discussion she and I had, and I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I think I understood her to say relative to these models, whatever they are, DCM, CAPM, that the assumptions or inputs, in other words, you got all this information or data, and I think even in your testimony you talk about how, I can't remember, she didn't use 3 of the ones you used or didn't use 2 of the ones. It was a difference. Mm-hmm. Her assumptions were different. What she chose to do was different than what you did. And if I understood her correctly, basically these models are just mathematical equations that you get data from various and sundry points and say, I like this, 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 and I'm going to put that in as X in this equation. And I looked at all these things. I want to use the mean instead of the low to high range, and you put that in the equation. That may be a simplification, but is that generally the way this kind of works?
You are correct, sir, that the DCF and the CAPM, for example, are mathematical equations. We could input any number of numbers into the different factors that go into that and come out with an estimate for the cost of equity. It is important to remember, though, which is obviously my job appearing before you as a witness on the cost of equity, that we use very reasonable inputs. I'm not selectively picking things that I feel might achieve a certain end. I let the data speak for itself. And from my education, my research, my background, I do feel that I have well-reasoned inputs that go into the models that I run and that achieve the results that I ultimately present before you all. It is absolutely a fact that Ms. Nelson uses different inputs than I do, as does Mr. Rothschild, as did Ms. Reno, and we have all come up with a varying range of results, which again is part of that mathematical equation. It probably is important to mention as well, though, that we do have a settlement amongst all the parties, either parties signing onto the settlement or not opposing it, for an ROE that is, again, within both of my DCF range and CAPM ranges.
I absolutely understand that, and I agree with that. I'm just trying to understand things better going forward. You know, I'm assuming this won't be the last time we do this. Well, if it is, I'll see you on the other side, but otherwise, that's my only interest in those questions, because, I hear models a lot, and that means different things to different people. A distribution model versus this model, which is an equation with a spreadsheet, and you just put stuff in it. Thank you both. I have no more questions, and
Commissioner Bell.
dinner time.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good
Ms.
afternoon.
Hip, you're off the hook. I've got a couple of questions for Ms. Pardue. Is there something going on in the market these days, that leads you to discount your CAPM results?
So I think the best answer to that question is, again, that the DCF model is a very market-based model where 2 of the 3 inputs are being tied to investor expectations. My concerns with the CAPM, and it is a model that is frequently used and frequently cited too, and I include it as a check for my analysis. 2 of those 3 inputs that go into that model, though, are estimates. And so to me, it creates a little bit more potential for there to be some fluidity in the results. Where we are right now, the CAPM is certainly, my DCF, is included within the CAPM results. And part of that is driven by the fact that we do have higher treasury yields right now. If we were to see a similar situation with lower treasury yields, we might see a different range come out of that, certainly. But I do feel very confident in the DCF model being a market-based model that provides a solid cost of equity estimate.
But is the CAPM a reliable model to look at?
I think it certainly can be. That's why I include it. I just ultimately, obviously, didn't include it as part of my recommendation.
Years ago, I think I heard a cost of equity witness describe the ROE recommendations as more art than science. Would you agree with that?
I would, yes.
And would you agree that, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but experience in running these models is very important?
I would agree with that, yes.
Are there times when the market might be in a position where you, as an expert ROE person, would give the CAPM model results more weight?
I think there certainly could be. I would take those as they came. It would be speculation for me right now to really speak to what those might be. But again, in running the cost of equity models that I did, it does rely on very well-reasoned inputs. And as you say, it is an art, not a science. There is a level of judgment that goes into it, and we must use well-reasoned inputs.
Well, I think all of the capital witnesses have a good bit of experience, and we saw some certainly differing opinions. So that's kind of interesting. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate your
Absolutely.
answers.
Thank you.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Belser. Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you. Yeah, just a follow-up. Basically, your range is by far the narrowest range in the analysis. And I'm just wondering, do you believe that brings extra value by using such a narrow range? I mean, there's so many different ways of looking at this, as has been discussed, so many different models, so many different inputs, and so many different opinions and informed judgment and all of that. Do you believe that a narrow range brings extra value to the table?
I'm not sure that I would necessarily say that a narrow range brings extra value. What I will say, Commissioner, is that these are the same models that I have used in every cost of equity analysis I've done and presented before the Commission. Part of the reason that the range is a little more narrow here for my DCF is because the averages and medians of the ROE results I got for the proxy companies were all fairly similar. And so that kind of created that cluster. It is certainly an estimate. We cannot precisely measure the cost of equity, but that is based on the inputs that I have used. That is the range that I did end up with the results.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Commissioner C. Williams.
Thank you, Chair Powers. Ms. Hipp, I appreciated the conversation that you had with Commissioner Thomas, and you talked about the number of calls that come in through the call center and hearing those and customers being put on payment plans. And I think you said very quickly that circumstance allowed them to not accrue any more penalties associated with their arrearages. But I did not get the exact words, but that's what I took away. I'd like you to clarify it, and I'm particularly asking because there was testimony in one of the night hearings that where I was trying to understand better how the penalties are defined, and I understand some of that is recorded with us, but that's where the question's coming from.
Certainly, I appreciate the question, Commissioner Williams, and I appreciate the opportunity to expand a little bit on what ORS does and actually give a shout out to our consumer services team. They're a small team. You've seen them at the night hearings. They run approximately 4 people. They handle approximately 13 to 15,000 calls from all sorts of utility customers, and they do a wonderful job. And one thing that I didn't touch on that I think is very important, even though we will work with customers to negotiate with the utility on payment plans or delayed payment opportunities that suit both the customer and the utility, we also network those customers with all sorts of other services. So it doesn't just stop at a payment plan. When we talk about and we hear from customers about housing issues or food insecurity, we are networking those customers, sometimes even through the utility, such as the case with Dominion. Dominion does a wonderful job of networking their customers with food programs or housing assistance. They don't just stop at electricity, and neither do our consumer service reps. So I need to make sure that you have a full understanding. We look at the customer as a holistic individual with all sorts of needs, and if we can help you find other types of assistance through the United Way or local community groups, we are absolutely going to do that. So I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to get that into the record. And looking at payment plans for customers. When a customer comes to ORS, they've already been to the utility and tried to make an arrangement that is satisfactory to them. So part of what ORS does is educate the customer on their rights. And the customer has a right to spread their past due balance over a 6-month period. That is written into the Commission's regulations. Now, when they make those payments, not only do they have to make 1/6 of their past due balance, but they also have to stay current. And sometimes that's a struggle for high use customers. So we talk and educate the customer about what keeps your bill current. How do you do that? You need to be thinking ahead. What's your thermostat set on? Have you availed yourself of the energy efficiency programs? And then networking those services to make sure that the customer has the supports to keep the payment plan. Customers are going month to month often. And so we need to make sure they understand this is a 6-month commitment. So you need to be able, if you sign up now for a payment plan, you need to carry it through for the next 6 months. And our goal is to not contribute to larger arrearages. One missed payment on the payment plan and not staying current, you fall off of the installment payment plan often, and then you risk disconnection and suffer late fees. And so our goal is to really think through with the customer, do a little financial planning to get them in the best position such that they're not incurring that 1.5% late fee charge that is falling up under the commission regulations. So there are kind of different ways to do it, if you will, but we listen to the customer, see what suits them, and then sometimes we have to give some reality type education and then work within those boundaries. Often we will see utilities, depending on where they're at in the payment structure, if the customer has a good payment history, sometimes there can be a renegotiation of that payment plan mid-cycle to avoid disconnection. And we look at that carefully to make sure that we're not compounding the arrearages. We don't want to see past due balances racking up late fees that a customer cannot pay. You know, often they can get a pledge from a community assistance agency, but sometimes, as we know, those are a one-time a year thing, and it is very difficult to kind of keep systematically making payments on your bill if you're relying on that one-time pledge to kind of get you out of the ditch. The other thing that's helpful to customers, depending on their special needs, is whether or not they qualify for a medical moratorium during some of these critical months, such that they don't face disconnection in the winter months in particular. And so we'll speak to them about that.
So I think what you said is that if they sign up for a payment plan, which is limited to, it's required to be 6 months, then there is no late fee attributed to those accounts.
There are late fees that are attributed to the account, the company, or so on the current balance, if the customer keeps current, they're not going to accrue a late fee on that. However, there are late fees that are embedded within that past due balance. And so they've already incurred that past due balance. They've already incurred the late fees. So quickly getting them to the end of the 6-month period. Or sometimes a customer will say, no, I can do it in 2 months. Let's do it in 2 months. And then we structure a payment plan with the cooperation of the utility for that.
So I understand they incurred them when they were incurring the past due charges. During the 6-month period where they're paying, are they incurred?
They do.
Okay. And a medical moratorium is associated with what?
It's to stave off disconnection during those critical service months for customers who can demonstrate that they have medical need to continue to have service, even if they have an inability to pay. And that's statutory.
Okay. And then those are bundled, and part of what we see when we're looking at the test year in terms of circumstances where fees have not been paid and bad debt kind of
I'm sure you're hearing about some of that as you're traveling in the night hearings. We certainly have spoken to customers who have been protected under that medical moratorium and then come out with a larger balance, and then we would structure a payment plan or community pledges to help them pay down that balance.
I'm recalling that there's something in the settlement agreement about bad debt and maybe a 50-50 kind of in terms of what will be paid. Does that sound familiar?
One of the provisions of the settlement agreement was an adoption of the ORS's adjustment to normalize the bad debt of the company.
Okay.
So remember, as bad debt grows, the company incurs more bad debt for whatever reasons customers are having difficulty paying. We saw it more during COVID. Companies have rebounded from that. You will see companies come out with large bad debt and potential write-downs, and that is harmful to ratepayers. So as we're structuring those payment arrangements for individual customers, we are also thinking about the company's additive to their bad debt and trying to avoid that, because then all of the customers will pay that. So what you're seeing in the settlement agreement is an adjustment to normalize bad debt as recommended by ORS.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, Commissioner Thomas, we still got to get Mr. Elliott on the road at 5:15. But
I completely understand and respect that. I have one last little thing I want to ask, and I don't have to have an answer today, and maybe there isn't an answer, but basically the low-income customers are the ones that struggle the most with paying the penalties and late fees. Would there make any sense at all to consider offering incentives to people to pay early or on time and reducing the amount of the late fees? And we might not have time for an answer, and that's just fine. Just wanted to throw that out there. So I'm done.
I like your creative thinking. So there are initiatives in other states, usually statutory driven, where it is some direction to the commission on specifically those two items that you talk about. The late fee is set in commission regulations. We've not seen a utility propose to reduce the late fees below what the commission states in regulation. Certainly that could be something that is considered, but the late fees, while a penalty to those that struggle to pay, also we field calls from customers who are very conscious of the additive nature of a late fee and the links that customers will go to avoid incurring late fees on high balances, such as borrowing from family members or seeking out church assistance, is something that makes them think about the bill to be paid. And so it's kind of this double edge. If you remove a late fee, I think you almost have to pair it with some incentive to pay early and pay on time. Otherwise, it can create some negative impacts on bad debt.
Thank you very much. That is good thinking. I had honestly hoped we would finish today. Obviously, there's still a few more things to tie up and ends that both witnesses and as far as the record. But what's the phrase? Promises not kept never were. And we promised Mr. Elliott we would stop today, and I think I'm going to keep that promise. I got 45 seconds or so.
Chair Powers, just a point of clarification, if you don't mind.
Yes, ORS, we've still got, I think, two more witnesses to put up, and of course, 3 more witnesses that we'd like to hear from, and we would need to do that in the morning. I'm sorry.
I understand, and I just wanted to clarify whether this panel was done with questions from the commission.
This panel is done. Well, we still got 45 seconds. Ms. Hipp, do you feel this agreement's in the best interest of the ratepayer?
I do, and I support it.
All right, and I think Mr. Kissel, when he first testified, he said something to the effect that this is a great deal for the ratepayer. This is a good thing. You feel it's a good thing?
I feel it's in the public interest.
All right, thank you, ma'am. We're going to be adjourned. Well,
Mr. Chairman, if I may, we have a couple of witnesses who are out of town. They might want to go catch an early flight. Obviously, if the commission desires to hear from them again, we'll round them up and put them up on the stand virtually. So if that's okay with you, I'd like to let them
Well,
see if they can find some travel arrangements to get home.
I think we're okay, and I was going to tell Mr. Kissam some of these people could go to work tomorrow if you want. But we if it suits everyone, we're going to be adjourned until 9:30 in the morning. Thank you
Chairman.
very much, and have a nice evening. Yes, ma'am.
Do you mind if I participate tomorrow virtually?
That'd be great.
Thank you so much.
We're adjourned.